Welcome to First Sleep Aid, calm stories to help you unwind, learn, and fall asleep. From true crime to curious facts and thoughtful ideas, always softly spoken. Subscribe now and take a deep breath. You're in good hands.
Winter in Boulder, Colorado, December '96. It wasn't just cold. There was this sort of quiet expectation in the air, the holidays settling in.
Yeah, exactly. And Boulder back then. It was this affluent place, right up against the mountains, very scenic.
Felt safe, like the kind of town where something like this just couldn't happen.
That's the feeling it gave off. Orderly, secure, almost like a bubble, far removed from, well, the kind of darkness that was about to descend.
And the Ramsey house itself, 755 15th Street. Big brick house. Kind of imposing, but also you picture it then with Christmas lights up.
Right. Inside, you imagine the usual post-Christmas scene.
Yeah.
Maybe wrapping paper still around, the tree, a sense of, cozy family life.
Comfortable domesticity, that's the image.
But then the morning after Christmas, really early, 5:52 a.m., that image just shatters.
It's a 911 call. Panic in the voice. Patsy Ramsey.
We have a kidnapping, and she mentions a note, a ransom note.
Kidnapping. That one word sets the whole initial response in motion, doesn't it?
No, it absolutely does. And what unfolds from there, it becomes more than just a crime. It becomes this huge cultural moment.
A phenomenon, really. The story, the image of JonBenét, the beauty pageant photos, it all gets locked together.
And it sticks, this haunting symbol of, well, innocence lost, maybe. Security shattered, definitely, and just so many questions left hanging.
Yeah, and as we get into this, it's important for you, the listener, to remember there's no neat ending here.
No, it's still an open case. What we're exploring are layers, evidence, speculation, theories. It's complex, and it's incomplete.
But at the absolute heart of it all, beneath the noise and the theories, there's a 6-year-old girl.
A family. And one incredibly cold, dark morning that just changed everything forever.
So picture that morning, December 26th. Fresh snow everywhere in Boulder. Pristine, almost unnervingly quiet.
That kind of muffled silence after a big snowfall, you know the one. But inside the Ramsey house, that quiet was already broken, terribly broken.
5:52 a.m. The phone rings at the Boulder Police Department. It's Patsy Ramsey. Her voice is, well, panicked, strained.
We have a kidnapping, she says. There's a note. She's gone. Just like that.
And the note, found on the staircase, which is odd in itself, the placement.
Very odd. And the note itself, 2.5 pages, handwritten, which is long for a ransom note, right?
Extremely long. And the tone, theatrical? Is that the right word?
I think so. It starts out, Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. It sounds like something out of a movie.
A small foreign faction, and the demand, $118,000.
Which, again, is weird. Not a round number, but it turns out to be almost exactly the amount of John Ramsey's Christmas bonus.
That detail is chilling. It suggests someone knew their finances intimately.
Right. So officers French and Vaich arrive minutes later. They look around, no broken windows, doors seem fine, no obvious forced entry.
Just the parents, obviously distraught. The house is quiet. JonBenét isn't in her room.
And the note specifically says not to call the police, but Patsy already has.
Meanwhile, John starts trying to get the money together, which must have been frantic.
Absolutely. And then friends start showing up. The family pastor. People coming to offer support.
Which is natural, of course, but
The house is becoming contaminated. Unknowingly, people are walking through a potential crime scene.
And for hours, the focus stays on the kidnapping narrative. 7 hours pass. Police are waiting, following procedure for a kidnapping. FBI is called.
All eyes are on that note, waiting for the supposed kidnapper's next move.
But downstairs, in the basement, in a small room.
Undiscovered. No one had searched the basement thoroughly. It's a critical oversight.
It's not until after 1 p.m. Detective Linda Arndt asks John Ramsey and a friend, Fleet White, to do another search, a more thorough one.
And John goes straight to the basement. He heads to this one particular door, a room they apparently didn't use much. Opens it.
And there she is.
Yeah. Covered with a white blanket, wrists tied over her head with cord, duct tape over her mouth, a garrote around her neck.
Lifeless, her eyes closed.
John cries out, carries her upstairs, lays her down near the Christmas tree.
And in that moment, everything shifts. The detective sees this, realizes this isn't a kidnapping anymore.
No, it's a murder. And it happened inside the house. That feeling of safety, of the home as a sanctuary, gone. instantly.
Let's talk more about that ransom note, because it really is one of the most bizarre elements.
It really is. 2.5 pages, handwritten. The opening line, Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. It just doesn't sound like a typical criminal communication.
And claiming to be a small foreign faction, it feels like it's trying too hard, almost.
Exactly. But maybe that length, that sort of rambling quality, initially made it seem more legitimate. Like someone took the time, so it must be real. It's strange logic.
And the contradictions. Don't call the police, but she did. Waits for a call, but it never comes.
And that $118,000 figure, so specific, so tied to the bonus, it screams insider knowledge, doesn't it?
It really does. Then there's the physical evidence of the note itself.
Right. The handwriting analysis later described it as shaky, maybe disguised, but also determined. And crucially, it was written on a notepad from inside the house.
With a felt-tip pen also found inside the house.
And they even found a discarded practice draft nearby. Someone spent time composing this in the house.
Which points away from a hurried external intruder scenario.
It does. And the language. We respect your business. Don't try to grow a brain, John. It sounds like dialogue snippets, almost cliched.
So the thinking evolves. Maybe the note wasn't really about ransom. Maybe it was about creating a story. Misdirection.
That becomes a strong theory. It was placed prominently on the stairs, meant to be found immediately to set that kidnapping narrative in motion.
And it worked initially.
Yeah.
It controlled those first critical hours.
Absolutely. Linguists, psychologists, law enforcement, they've picked this note apart for decades. And the consensus feeling is often that it feels like a performance piece, staged.
Designed to mislead from the very start. Okay, let's shift to the basement.
Right. The basement itself wasn't, a finished rec room. It was more like a collection of smaller, darker, semi-finished spaces. Lots of potential hiding spots.
And that one closed door in the back just gets missed for hours amidst all the people, the police activity.
It's hard to fathom, but it happened. Until Detective Arndt suggests that second search.
And John Ramsey goes right to it. He opens that door to the small, windowless room, the wine cellar sometimes called.
And finds JonBenét. The details are horrific. Covered by the blanket, the cord, the duct tape near her mouth, not actually on it when found. The garrote.
And she wasn't in her pajamas anymore. She was in a white top.
Yeah, different clothes. There were signs of a head injury, signs of strangulation, but no one reported hearing a struggle during the night.
Which is another deeply puzzling aspect.
When John brings her upstairs, that cry. Detective Arndt described feeling suddenly vulnerable, realizing the killer might still be there. She mentioned checking her weapon.
That moment just obliterates the kidnapping theory. Instantly.
The crime scene is internal. It began and ended in that house. And that overlooked basement room becomes the grim focal point.
This brings us to the initial police response, which has been heavily criticized.
And arguably, for good reason, there seemed to be this blurring of lines. Were they investigating a crime or comforting a grieving, prominent family?
Allowing friends, neighbors, the pastor inside. It's unthinkable from a modern crime scene perspective.
Absolutely. Potential contamination everywhere. And the handling of the ransom note picked up, passed around without gloves, not photographed in situ first. Basic errors.
John moving the body, though understandable from a father's perspective, disrupted the scene before forensic experts could examine her position.
Right. And Detective Arndt, the first detective on scene, was left alone for significant periods. Backup was slow. The specific expertise needed wasn't there initially.
The house wasn't sealed off properly. It wasn't treated like the active murder scene it turned out to be. Arndt's own reported feelings of being outnumbered, checking her bullets. It paints a picture of a situation spiraling out of procedural control.
And crucially, no lockdown. No formal, separated interviews of John and Patsy on that first day. People were allowed to leave. The scene wasn't secured.
These weren't just minor missteps. They had huge consequences down the line.
Huge degradation of evidence, memories getting confused or conflated, the narrative becoming messy right from the start. It was a failure that began almost immediately, in that initial uncertainty and lack of firm control.
We have to talk about JonBenét's public image, even before her death. The beauty pageants.
Yes, that's a huge part of how the public came to know her or think they knew her. She was involved from a young age. Stages, hotels, elaborate costumes, makeup.
Often with her mother, Patsy, who was herself a former beauty queen, Miss West Virginia.
Right, so it was this shared activity. And the photos from that time, they are striking, sometimes unsettling to people.
The white cowboy outfit, the big hair, the adult-like poses in sequin gowns. She was described as angelic, like a doll.
There's a practiced quality to her expressions in those photos, but also this alertness, this awareness in her eyes. It's complex.
And child beauty pageants themselves occupy this difficult space, somewhere between celebrating a child and, well, commodifying them, play becoming performance.
Did JonBenét enjoy it? Reports suggest she did. Did she understand the complexities? Unlikely at 6 years old.
But that image, that pageant princess image, became incredibly powerful after her death. It was replayed endlessly.
It became the image, a symbol of innocence maybe, but also a source of intense scrutiny and suspicion directed at the family. What did this whole pageant thing mean?
The contrast between that stage persona, the makeup, the routines, and the reality of her being a 6-year-old kindergartner was stark.
The camera found her long before the crime, and in doing so, it kind of pre-framed how the tragedy would be perceived and endlessly dissected.
That image then just exploded into the public consciousness after her death.
It spread like wildfire, and she fit this archetype, didn't she? The innocent child victim, specifically the idealized image of a white, affluent, blonde little girl.
And the shattering of that specific archetype seemed to trigger a kind of cultural panic. Her photos were everywhere, instantly recognizable symbols of the tragedy.
But, the idea of innocence itself is often applied selectively. Some victims get far more attention than others.
And there was also this undercurrent of discomfort, wasn't there? With the pageant photos, her polished, almost mature appearance made some people uneasy, raised questions about boundaries even before the crime.
Right. And that idealization, the perfect child image, paradoxically led to even more intense scrutiny of her family. If the child was perfect, the context had to be perfect too. Any perceived imperfection was magnified.
It felt like her image stopped belonging to her or her family. It became public property, a symbol everyone felt entitled to interpret.
Which leads to the power and the problem of photographs in a case like this.
They seem to promise truth, don't they? A window into a life. But after death, they become something else. Artifacts.
And there were so many photos of JonBenét, professional portraits, pageant shots, performance videos, a huge visual archive.
And these images became absolutely central to the media coverage. News anchors held them up, talk shows projected them, tabloids splashed them on covers.
They were meant to humanize her, perhaps, but the sheer volume almost did the opposite. It overwhelmed the memory of the actual child, turning her into this endlessly repeated symbol.
And people started reading things into them, analyzing her smile, her eyes. Was she happy? Was she hiding something? Each photo became a kind of Rorschach test for the public's fears and suspicions.
The fact that the camera captured performance, not just spontaneous childhood moments, also seemed to disturb people. It fed into ideas of artificiality, of something being hidden.
Which led to accusations against the family exploitation, creating a facade,
Right.
often ignoring the fact that, well, most families take lots of pictures of their kids.
But these weren't treated just as family photos anymore. They became clues, evidence to be dissected endlessly. JonBenét's life got stuck in this loop of the same images, freezing her.
Yeah, freezing her in time as the pageant girl. The personal context was stripped away. It became almost like a public archive, tragically.
Yeah, the house itself, that imposing brick structure on 15th Street, also became a sort of reflection or maybe a symbol.
The contrast is stark, isn't it? This image of affluent stability on the outside and the horrific violence that occurred within.
And the size of the house. It allows for blind spots, places unseen, unheard. The architecture itself almost felt like a metaphor for secrets, for compartmentalization, the gap between appearance and reality.
Before the murder, visitors apparently described the house and the Ramseys as calm, composed. Maintaining appearances was clearly important.
But after JonBenét's death, that polished surface felt different. It felt like a mask. Suddenly, every room seemed suspicious. Even Christmas decorations could feel unsettling in retrospect.
And the physical layout, the confusing basement, that small hidden room where she was found, it mirrored the confusion of the case itself. Difficult to navigate physically and figuratively.
The house was eventually sold, renovated, but the memory of its original layout persists. It felt like maybe the house knew the truth, but we just didn't know how to read it.
And we have to consider the role of privilege in how things unfolded, especially in those initial stages.
Absolutely. It's often unspoken, but it's there. In the way people are treated, the assumptions made, who gets the benefit of the doubt. The Ramseys were prominent, wealthy people in Boulder.
And the initial police response seemed to reflect that. They were treated more like victims needing comfort than potential suspects needing investigation, at least at first. There's a certain deference.
They were also able to assemble their own support network very quickly. Lawyers, PR people, friends in influential places.
Which led to delays in formal interviews, contributed to the crime scene issues we discussed, and allowed their legal team to start shaping the narrative very early on.
You have to ask, right? Would a family without those resources, without that social standing, have been treated the same way? Would they have been allowed that same space?
Privilege often manifests as that benefit of the doubt. Their refusal later to be interviewed separately by police, insisting their lawyers be present, communicating through attorneys.
Critics saw that as stonewalling, deliberately obstructing the investigation.
Supporters saw it as prudent self-protection, given the intense media scrutiny and the potential for misinterpretation.
Either way, it highlighted how wealth and status can influence the pace and process of justice. They weren't arrested, weren't formally named suspects for a long time, despite being under intense suspicion. Those unspoken rules held sway.
And that scrutiny inevitably turned to the family dynamics themselves, the image they presented versus what might have been going on beneath the surface.
Right. The public became fascinated, almost obsessed with parsing their behavior. Patsy's very outward, sometimes loud displays of grief versus John's calmer, more reserved demeanor.
People questioned if it was genuine emotion or some kind of performance, which feels incredibly intrusive, but it happened.
And their son, Burke. His quietness, the fact that he apparently slept through everything, that became a focus of intense speculation and suspicion years later.
Theories just multiplied, didn't they? Unproven ideas about sibling rivalry, arguments, accidents, parental cover-ups, all filling the vacuum left by the lack of clear answers.
And when the family closed ranks, understandably perhaps, trying to protect themselves, that silence was often interpreted as guilt, as concealment.
In the absence of arrests or clear evidence, the public essentially became the jury, and the family became this screen onto which people projected their own fears about family secrets and hidden darkness.
Those potential fractures, whether real or imagined, just hung over them like shadows. They could never really go back to just being a family. They were trapped by the image and the suspicion.
And then came the media, like a storm.
Oh, absolutely. News vans descended on that quiet Boulder street almost immediately. The Ramsey home became a backdrop for live broadcasts.
The story just took off. Local, then national, then international obsession, starting basically the day after Christmas, 1996. It was an irresistible, horrifying headline.
And the case had all the elements that cable news, which was really hitting its stride then, thrives on.
A young, beautiful, blonde victim from a wealthy family. The beauty pageant angle added that extra layer of intrigue or unease. She was photogenic and tragically voiceless.
Reporters camped out. Cable news provided 24/7 coverage, filling time with speculation, interviews with anyone remotely connected, endless expert analysis.
The coverage felt exhaustive, but also circular. It was more about maintaining presence, keeping the story alive, than reporting actual progress in the investigation.
You could argue it was one of the first major crimes of the cable news era to be consumed almost entirely as a real-time myth.
And the Boulder police seemed completely unprepared for that level of media onslaught. Their struggles with managing the press, the leaks, the conflicting information, it just fueled more rumors and speculation. The media wasn't just reporting the case, it was actively shaping it.
It put the Ramseys in an impossible position, too. If they stayed silent, they looked guilty. If they spoke, every word was dissected, potentially twisted. Hesitation looked like calculation.
The whole thing became less a local tragedy and more massive American media event. It turned into content, and the main goal seemed to be just keeping the cameras rolling.
And this case really did become a kind of national mirror, didn't it? Reflecting back all sorts of American fixations.
Beauty, innocence, wealth, class. It hit all those notes. It tapped into these long-standing archetypes about who matters, whose story gets told.
Right. The mysterious death of a young, white, affluent child. It resonated in a way that, sadly, the disappearances or deaths of children from less privileged backgrounds often don't. National outrage remains selective.
JonBenét's image, especially the pageant photos, seemed to fulfill some collective idea of the perfect, almost doll-like American child.
And that made her beauty both captivating and unsettling. It distorted perception. People found it harder to see her or her family as just ordinary people caught in an extraordinary tragedy.
The tragedy became a myth that demanded interpretation. Was she a symbol of innocence destroyed? Or proof of parental overreach? Or evidence of dark secrets hidden behind wealthy facades?
The case became this screen for projecting anxieties about parenting, about class, about the performance of femininity, about family life itself. These debates played out very publicly.
She ended up being both a real victim and this complex cultural metaphor. Her short life turned into narrative fodder, and her death exposed the machinery of American attention and obsession.
And central to that obsession is the American desire for closure. We want stories, especially crime stories, to have endings. Good guys, bad guys, resolution.
But the JonBenét Ramsey case just refuses to provide that. It defies neat narratives,
Exactly. You have contradictory evidence. You have behavior from key players that seems inexplicable at times. You have timelines that are fuzzy and contested.
which led to these two main competing theories solidifying. Either an intruder did it, or someone in the family was responsible, likely followed by a cover-up.
And both theories have persisted for decades, despite significant gaps and lack of definitive proof for either. Why? Because they offer a story. They offer a sense of potential closure, even if it's unproven.
It's almost more comfortable, maybe, to believe strongly in one narrative, even with its flaws, than to accept the possibility of a messy systemic failure or simply not knowing.
The public's relationship with the case often feels more like belief than investigation. People choose the theory that makes the most sense to them.
And the case itself just gives you fragments, doesn't it? The bizarre note. The body found in the basement, not taken away. The inconclusive DNA. The grand jury findings that were kept secret for so long. It's like puzzle pieces that don't quite fit together.
That very lack of resolution is part of what makes it so enduringly magnetic and also so frustrating, so unbearable.
So meaning gets constructed through media, through documentaries, through online forums. The case kind of leaves the realm of active investigation and enters American folklore.
And belief, in a way, becomes its own kind of resolution for many people, even if it doesn't bring actual peace or justice.
Let's look closer at the investigation itself, the evidence or lack thereof. Physical evidence should tell a story, right? Leave traces.
It should. But in this case, the language of the scene was fractured, contradictory. You have no forced entry, the snow outside apparently undisturbed near key points like a basement window.
But then you have JonBenét found hidden in a basement room, the ransom note written inside the house, with house materials. No signs of a struggle reported in her bedroom. It points inwards.
But then, the condition of the body itself. Clear signs of violent strangulation, a significant head trauma. Yet the autopsy couldn't definitively pinpoint the exact sequence or time of death. Inconclusive in key ways.
So the recurring theme is absence as much as presence. What wasn't there? What didn't make sense?
Exactly. You have unidentified DNA found under her fingernails and on her clothing, initially thought to belong to an unknown male intruder, but later analysis complicated that, and it hasn't led to a suspect.
You have a shoe print found near the body, but its origin remains unclear. You have that broken basement window, but also reports of an intact cobweb stretching across it, suggesting it wasn't a recent entry point.
The handwriting analysis of the note. Experts offered differing opinions, but nothing legally definitive linking it conclusively to one person.
The investigation became this catalog of ambiguities. When the physical evidence didn't provide a clear path, suspicion naturally turned inward, focusing on behavior, on tone, on inconsistencies in statements.
And divisions started appearing within the investigation itself,
Mm.
between detectives, between the police department, and the district attorney's office.
The forensic trail just seemed to loop back on itself, leading to more questions, more doubt, more silence.
The evidence wasn't speaking clearly. It became a field for interpretation, for competing narratives. No smoking gun, no clear set of fingerprints or footprints leading definitively to a killer.
Just a child dead in her own home with no single universally accepted explanation. And the investigation ultimately stalled in those shadows.
And those failures, they happened in stages. It wasn't just one mistake.
It started on day one, didn't it? The unsecured crime scene, people moving freely through the house, contamination from the very beginning.
The mishandling of the note, John Ramsey moving the body. These are critical errors in the initial moments.
And then the lack of immediate, formal, separated interviews. Those first 24-48 hours are so crucial in any investigation. Here, they dissolved into a kind of managed chaos.
That delay allowed time for stories to potentially align, time for legal protections to be firmly put in place.
And the internal friction we mentioned between the Boulder Police Department and the District Attorney's Office, that reportedly hampered progress too. Disagreements, lack of coordination, maybe even mistrust.
While the investigation struggled internally, the media was sprinting ahead, publicizing leaks, fueling speculation, creating immense public pressure. Trust in the official investigation began to erode.
The case felt like it was slipping away, transforming from an active crime scene into this tangled, fading memory, even as it was happening.
By the time outside experts were more heavily involved or certain forensic tests were conducted, some of the crucial evidence was potentially compromised or its context lost. That initial window, the most vital one, had effectively closed due to a series of cumulative failures.
What was left wasn't really an open case in the sense of active leads, but more like an open wound, still painful, still unresolved.
And that divide between the Boulder PD and the DA's office became quite public later on.
Yeah, it seemed like the police detectives, based on the crime scene evidence, the note, the lack of forced entry, the body location leaned more strongly towards the theory that the crime originated within the family.
Whereas the district attorney's office, led by Alex Hunter at the time, appeared more cautious. Maybe due to the Ramsey status, maybe due to the lack of absolutely direct smoking gun evidence against them, concerned about the ability to win a conviction in court.
This led to reported issues with sharing information, strategic disagreements, delays. The investigation sometimes seemed bogged down in jurisdictional friction.
And the early involvement of the Ramseys' lawyers definitely played a role. Controlling access, filtering communication, the police saw it as evasion. The DA's office perhaps saw it more as lawyers doing their job, ensuring due process.
This lack of direct, unfiltered access made it harder to build a cohesive case or develop a single unifying theory that satisfied both agencies.
And then, nearly a year after the murder, this internal conflict bursts into the open, further damaging public confidence. This involves the grand jury.
Right. A grand jury was convened to hear evidence, and in 1999, they actually voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey.
Not for murder, interestingly, but on charges related to child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime, essentially suggesting they permitted a dangerous situation and helped cover something up.
But District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment. He didn't believe he could secure a conviction based on the evidence presented. He publicly announced that no charges would be filed.
And crucially, he didn't reveal at that time that the grand jury had voted to indict. That information remained sealed, secret, for over a decade.
When it finally came out years later, through court filings and reporting, it was stunning to many people. It raised huge questions about the decision-making process, about transparency.
Legally, by then, the statute of limitations on the specific charges had expired, so it didn't lead to a trial.
But symbolically,
Yeah.
it completely undermined the Ramseys' long-held position that no grand jury had ever found probable cause to charge them.
That secrecy, intended perhaps to avoid a potentially failed prosecution, ended up just preserving the ambiguity, the uncertainty. It became another locked room in the already complex architecture of this case.
So the Ramseys existed in this strange legal and public limbo, never charged with the murder, but never truly cleared in the eyes of many. That not guilty but not innocent label stuck.
They remained under a cloud of suspicion. Every detail was re-examined. Patsy's demeanor on the 911 call, John's initial calmness, Burke's silence. Years later, Burke successfully sued a network over implications made in a documentary.
The personal cost must have been immense. The constant media scrutiny, the hate mail, needing security, the house becoming notorious, unlivable for them.
They eventually relocated, tried to build quieter lives, but the case followed them. Every public appearance, every rare interview was analyzed, picked apart.
They were trapped in this narrative that didn't need proof anymore, just their continued presence as factors of suspicion. Even their attempts to tell their side, like writing a book, were often viewed cynically.
Public expectations about how grieving parents should behave were intense. When the Ramseys didn't conform to those expectations, it fueled suspicion.
Even after Patsy Ramsey died of cancer in 2006, some people still publicly questioned her role. The suspicion outlived her.
Later DNA testing, particularly touch DNA analysis in 2008, led the DA's office at that time to issue a formal apology, saying the results pointed away from the immediate family. But even that didn't fully lift the cloud for everyone.
So, never convicted, but never truly free of the case either. Living, and in Patsy's case, dying, in that unresolved space.
And eventually, the cameras mostly left Boulder. The 2047 news cycle moved on. But for the Ramseys, that silence probably wasn't relieving. It likely felt heavy, accusatory.
The years that followed were marked by that distance, by lawsuits, by periodic bursts of media attention, by apologies from officials, and then renewed scrutiny.
The house on 15th Street was sold, renovated, changed hands. But in the public imagination, its floor plan remains that map of speculation, as you called it earlier.
Patsy's death closed one chapter, but didn't resolve the mystery. John remarried, appeared publicly less often. Burke gave that one major interview in 2016 for the 20th anniversary, which itself drew criticism for his demeanor.
Still no charges for the murder, no arrests, no definitive resolution, but profound consequences for everyone involved, especially the family. They became this sort of American parable, didn't they? Depending on who you ask, a parable about privilege or media excess or police incompetence or the darkness hidden in plain sight.
Advances in DNA technology offer occasional glimmers of hope. Cold case reviews happen, but so far nothing has provided that definitive answer. The case remains officially open, but largely stagnant.
Justice delayed in this case feels like justice denied. The case enters the realm of myth, resurfacing on anniversaries and new documentaries, always circling back to the same unanswered questions.
And JonBenét herself remains frozen in time. A symbol, yes, but also a silence. A reminder of a life cut short, of answers never found. An aftermath without a conclusion. Just this persistent, aching question mark.
So we end where we began, really, the central mystery. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? That lack of a definitive answer is the enduring, haunting core of it all.
And the house.
Yeah.
You can't help but picture it. Not just bricks and mortar, but this container of unresolved possibilities, of confusion, of silence. It still feels like it belongs more to the story than to anyone living there now.
Thinking about JonBenét's life, the parts we know, the pageant images, and then the life she was denied, it's profoundly sad. Her death left no confession, no credible witness, no conviction.
The true haunting, perhaps, isn't about ghosts. It's the haunting of clarity that never arrived. The cost of an unsolved case like this is immense, not just the lost life, but the elusive meaning, the inability to fully understand why, that persistent ache.
And time just keeps moving forward, decades now, without that resolution. The quiet of the house today seems to echo the long silence surrounding the truth of what happened there.
Yeah, within the memory of that house and the case itself, there's just this enduring stillness, a sense almost of something still waiting to be known.